He's here. The Nativity from Luke 1 through 2.
Everything was ready. The moment God had been waiting for was here at last. God was coming to help his people just as he promised in the beginning.
But how would he come? What would he be like? What would he do?
Mountains would have bowed, seas would have roared, trees would have clapped their hands, but the earth held its breath. As silent as snow falling, he came in, and when no one was looking in the darkness, he came.
There was a young girl who was engaged to a man named Joseph.
Joseph was the great
grandson of King David.
That's a lot of greats.
One morning, Mary was minding her own business when suddenly a great whirl of light appeared right there in her bedroom. He was Gabriel, and he was an angel, a special messenger from heaven.
When she saw the tall, shining man standing there, Mary was frightened. "You don't need to be scared," Gabriel said. "God is very happy with you."
Mary looked around if perhaps he was talking to someone else. "Mary," Gabriel said, and he laughed with such gladness that Mary's eyes filled with sudden tears.
"Mary, you're going to have a baby, a little boy. You will call him Jesus. He is God's own son. He is the one. He is the rescuer."
The God who flung planets into space and kept them whirling round and round. The God who made the universe with just one word. The one who could do anything at all was making himself small and coming down as a baby.
Wait, God was sending a baby to rescue the world?
But it's too wonderful, Mary said, and felt her heart beating hard. How can this be true?
Is anything too wonderful for God? Gabriel asked.
So Mary trusted God more than what her eyes could see, and she believed. "I'm God's servant," she said. "Whatever God says, I will do."
Sure enough, it was just as the angel had said. 9 months later, Mary was almost ready to have her baby.
Now Mary and Joseph had to take a trip to Bethlehem, to the town where King David was from. But when they reached the little town, they found that every room was full. Every bed was taken.
"Go away," the innkeepers told them. "There isn't any place for you."
Where would they stay? Soon Mary's baby would come.
They couldn't find anywhere except an old tumble-down stable, so they stayed where the cows and donkeys and horses stayed.
And there, in the stable, amongst the chickens and the donkeys and the cow, in the quiet of the night, God gave his world his wonderful gift. The baby that would change the world was born, his baby son.
Mary and Joseph wrapped him up to keep him warm. They made a soft bed of straw and used the animal's feeding trough as his cradle. They gazed in wonder at God's great gift, wrapped in swaddling clothes and lying in a manger.
Mary and Joseph named him Jesus, Emmanuel, which means God has come to live with us.
Because, of course, he had.
He is here. The long-awaited Messiah is finally here. We're talking all the way back to Genesis, finally here. There's been thousands of years of waiting for this very moment. In Genesis chapter 3, man and woman rebelled against God, and we have the serpent present where God pronounces judgment, but gives a sliver of hope. Check this out. Genesis chapter 3. "I will put enmity between you and the woman, between your offspring and her offspring. He shall bruise your head, and you shall bruise his heel." That little bit right there is the promise that the Messiah is going to come and crush the head of the snake and completely take care of it. And so when Gabriel sent that message, he sent a message of hope that this Messiah is finally here.
The light of the whole world. The story of shepherds from Luke 2.
That same night, in amongst the other stars, suddenly a new star appeared. Of all the stars in the dark vaulted heavens, this one shone clear. It blazed in the night and made the other stars look pale beside it.
God put it there when his baby son was born, to be like a spotlight shining on him, lighting up the darkness, showing people the way to him.
You see, God was like a new daddy. He couldn't keep the good news to himself. He'd been waiting all these long years for this moment, and now he wanted to tell everyone.
So he pulled out all the stops. He sent an angel to tell Mary the good news. He put a special star in the sky to show where his baby boy was. And now he was going to send a big choir of angels to sing his happy song to the world.
He is here.
He's
He is
come.
come.
Go and see him, my little boy.
Now, where would you send your splendid choir? To a big concert hall, maybe? Or a palace, perhaps? God sent his to a little hillside, outside a little town, in the middle of the night. He sent all those angels to sing for a raggedy old bunch of shepherds watching their sheep outside of Bethlehem.
In those days, remember, people used to laugh at shepherds and saying they were smelly and called them rude names, which I cannot possibly mention here. You see, people thought shepherds were nobodies, just scruffy old riffraff.
But God must have thought shepherds were very important indeed, because they're the ones he chose to tell the good news first.
That night, some shepherds were out in the open fields, warming themselves by a campfire. Then suddenly, the sheep darted. They were frightened by something. The olive trees rustled. But what was that? A wing beat?
They turned around. Standing in front of them was a huge warrior of light, blazing in the darkness. "Don't be afraid of me," the bright shining man said. "I haven't come to hurt you. I've come to bring you some happy news for everyone everywhere. Today, in David's town in Bethlehem, God's son has been born. You can go and see him. He is sleeping in a manger."
Behind the angel, they saw a strange glowing cloud, except it wasn't a cloud. It was angels, troops and troops of angels armed with light. And they were singing a beautiful song. "Glory to God be fame and honor and all our hoorays." Then as quickly as they appeared, the angels left.
The shepherds stamped out their fire, left their sheep, raced down the grassy hill, through the gates of Bethlehem, down the narrow cobble streets, through a courtyard, down some steps, past an inn, round a corner, through a hedge, until at last they reached a tumble-down stable.
They caught their breath. Then quietly they tiptoed inside. They knelt on the dirt floor. They had heard about this promised child, and now he was here, Heaven's Son, the maker of the stars, a baby sleeping in his mother's arms.
This baby would be like the bright star shining in the sky that night,
A light to light up the whole world.
Chasing away darkness, helping people see.
And the darker the night got, the brighter the star would shine.
The light of the world. The light is here. We have shepherds that are taking care of sheep, and then all of a sudden, those angels show up, and it is a lit orchestra. And they go and they see this king, this light that is in the midst of darkness. Now, when we think of darkness, I need you to think not only like a dark room, but I need you to think of the world. The world has just been corrupt and evil, and men have tried to reach for their own intentions, and yet in the midst of darkness, God sends a light, the light himself, the author himself. Check out what John says. "In the beginning was the Word, and the Word was with God, and the Word was God. He was in the beginning with God. All things were made through him, and without him was not anything made that was made. In him was light, and the light was the light of men. The light shines in darkness, and the darkness has not overcome it." And this is what we get to look to. This Christmas, we get to look to the light that truly matters, that will guide us towards the right path, Jesus.
the King of all kings. The story of the three wise men from Matthew 2.
Far away in the east, 3 clever men saw the very same star, the star that God had put in the sky when Jesus was born.
They knew it was a sign. A baby king had been born. They had been waiting for the star. They knew it would come.
"He's here," they shouted. "He's here."
And I'm sure if you'd been there, you would have heard them laughing and dancing and singing until the sun came up.
At dawn, they packed up their camels and wrapped gifts for the baby. They brought their most precious treasures of all, frankincense, gold, and myrrh, special, sparkly, lovely smelling, gleaming things, just right for a king.
The three wise men, actually, if you had met them, you would have thought they were kings because they were so rich and clever and important looking. Shut up.
They rode their camels.
The across endless deserts,
up steep, steep mountains,
down into deep, deep valleys,
through raging rivers,
over grassy plains,
night and day and night, for hours that turned into days, that turned into weeks, that turned into months and months, until at last they reached Jerusalem.
Jerusalem was by far the most important city for miles around, and, as anyone can tell you, that's where the palace would be, and kings are born in palaces. So that's where they went. But they were in for a surprise.
They went to see King Herod. Surely he'd known where this baby was, but he didn't. In fact, he didn't like the sound of a new king. It made him cross. And he didn't want anyone to be king except him.
But Herod's advisors told the 3 wise men what was written in the books, what God had said about the baby king. Go to Bethlehem, that is where you will find him. Suddenly the star they had seen in the east started moving again, showing them the way.
So the 3 wise men followed the star out of the big city, along the road, into the little town of Bethlehem, that followed the star through the streets of Bethlehem, out of the nice part of town, through the not so nice part of town, into the really not so nice at all part of town, down a little dirt track, until it stopped right over a little house.
But wait, it wasn't a palace, and there weren't any guards, or servants, or flags, or red carpets, or trumpets, or anything? Did they get it wrong? Or is this what God meant?
Sure enough, in the little house, there sitting on his mom's knee, they found him, the baby king. The 3 men knelt before the little king. They took off their rich royal turbans and gleaming golden crowns. They bowed their noble heads to the ground and gave him their sparkling treasures.
The journey that had begun so many centuries before had led the 3 wise men here, to a little house, to a little town, to a little child, to the king God had promised David all those years before.
But this child was a new kind of king. Though he was the Prince of Heaven, he had become poor. Though he was a mighty God, he had become a helpless baby. This king hadn't come to be the boss. He'd come to be a servant.
The king is here. The king is here, y'all. We've been talking about it. He's finally here. We've been waiting for him. He's the light in the midst of the darkness. And now we have these wise men, these magi that come from a far distant land to come worship this king. Now, for some people, this is not a big deal. This is like, oh yeah. But you keep in mind here that a group of men who have never been to Israel come to Israel to bear gifts and to bow before a king. Now that's amazing. And now this king is not in a palace, right? He's born in a manger with Joseph and Mary and a bunch of other farm animals. And yet we have these magi that are coming and bowing down. This is amazing when we talk about it's just not just a Jewish type of worship, but all nations are coming in and bowing down before this king. And that is exactly what this Christmas season brings us all about. The Advent, that God has come and he is going to come again for all of his children. And guess what? He is the King of Kings and the Lord of Lords, and every knee will bow. And so the question is, will you bow to him now or later? This is the king that we serve. This is the king that we follow. We follow King Jesus. And this is the wonderful gift that we have for Christmas.